Somewhere in America, in the winter of 1980, a man walked into a video store and paid $99 for a tape. That was not unusual. VHS tapes cost $99 in 1980. What was unusual is that 12,000 other people did the exact same thing on the very same day. One film, one day, 12,000 copies sold. Not Star Wars, not Grease, not any film from the biggest studios in Hollywood. A mature genre feature shot in Los Angeles and London on a budget no major studio would have looked at twice. It went on to become the single best-selling home video release in the United States of America for 2 consecutive years. Not best-selling in its category, best-selling full stop. And the woman at the center of it, the woman whose face moved those 12,000 copies in a single day, had originally been the face on a soapbox. This is the story of Insatiable, made in 1980, and I promise you, it is far stranger and far more moving than anything you expect. Before we go any further, before we talk about the film, the director, the London location shoots, or the record-breaking sales, I need to show you something. That box, that woman. In the early 1970s, a young model from Connecticut named Marilyn Briggs was hired by Procter & Gamble. Her image, wholesome, warm, cradling an infant, was chosen to represent Ivory Snow soap flakes, one of the most trusted household names in America. Their famous tagline read, 99 and 44 100% pure. Within months, that exact same face appeared on cinema screens across the country in one of the most controversial and talked about films of the decade. Procter & Gamble pulled the product from shelves. America was scandalized. And Marilyn Briggs, who had renamed herself Marilyn Chambers, became, overnight, the most famous face in a brand new genre. But here's the question almost nobody ever asked. What happened to her next? Because behind the scandal, behind the Ivory Snow irony, and behind the fame, there was a woman who genuinely wanted to be a serious actress, who believed she had the talent for it, who spent the entire second half of the 1970s knocking on Hollywood's door, and Hollywood told her no. Insatiable was her answer to that rejection. And the story of how it came to exist is one of the Golden Age's greatest, most overlooked chapters. To understand why Insatiable mattered, you have to understand the moment it arrived. The 1970s had produced something genuinely unprecedented. Critics called it porno chic. For a brief, extraordinary window, mature genre films played in legitimate theaters, were reviewed in mainstream newspapers, and attracted mainstream audiences. Roger Ebert wrote about them, they were discussed on television. But by 1979, that window had slammed shut. The VHS cassette was arriving, and it was about to change everything. Why pay to sit in a cinema when you could watch at home? Producers who had invested in expensive, cinematic, theatrical productions watched their entire business model evaporate in real time. Budgets collapsed. The craft, the cinematography, the original music scores, the genuine storytelling ambition was being discarded. The industry was dying, and most people inside it were cutting costs to survive. One producer decided to do exactly the opposite. He was going to make the most expensive, most cinematic, most ambitious, mature genre film ever produced. Right at the moment, everyone else was giving up on quality entirely. And to do it, he needed to find the one woman whose name could still fill a cinema in 1980. The director of Insatiable is credited as Godfrey Daniels. That is not his name. Behind the pseudonym was a man called Stu Seagal, a producer with sharp commercial instincts, a genuine eye for production value, and an unusual conviction that audiences, even in this genre, responded to quality. Seagal established a company called Miracle Films specifically to produce this picture. The name was not accidental. He intended this to be exactly that, a miracle. A statement that the Golden Age still had something worth saying. What almost no one knows is what Stu Seagal became next. And then, in 1979, the very year Insatiable began production, Marilyn Chambers auditioned for Paul Schrader's film, Hardcore, a serious Hollywood picture about the mature film industry. She was rejected. The reason given was that she was, and I want you to really hear this, too wholesome to play a performer in that world. The Ivory Snow girl. When Stu Seagal approached her for Insatiable, she was not simply available, she was ready. She negotiated hard, securing strong financial terms and demanding professional standards on set that were unusual for any production in the genre. This was not a compromise. This was a declaration. She was coming back on her own terms. And she intended to show every person who had ever closed a door in her face exactly what they had turned away. Within just a few years of Insatiable, he walked away from the genre entirely. He went on to produce Hunter, the long-running NBC crime drama. He built Stu Seagal Productions in San Diego into one of the most respected independent facilities in California. He eventually created realistic law enforcement and military training simulations for the United States government. The man who made Insatiable ended up making training programs for American soldiers. But in 1979, all of that was still ahead of him. Right now, he had a legend to convince, a script to shoot, and $500,000 to spend. Marilyn Chambers was born Marilyn Ann Briggs in Providence, Rhode Island on the 22nd of April, 1952. After Behind the Green Door made her a cultural phenomenon in 1972, she had genuinely believed mainstream Hollywood would welcome her. She had a Screen Actors Guild card earned from a small role in the 1970 Barbra Streisand film The Owl and the Pussycat. She had beauty, charisma, and real screen presence. Several major studios had floated her name for legitimate projects. The door stayed closed. In 1977, the great horror director David Cronenberg cast her in Rabid, a genuinely disturbing, well-reviewed science fiction horror film. She carried it. Critics noticed. It made no difference. The label, once applied, would not come off. And then, in 1979, the very year Insatiable began production, Marilyn Chambers auditioned for Paul Schrader's film, Hardcore, a serious Hollywood picture about the mature film industry. She was rejected. The reason given was that she was, and I want you to really hear this, too wholesome to play a performer in that world. The Ivory Snow girl. Too pure. To play herself. When Stu Seagal approached her for Insatiable, she was not simply available. She was ready. She negotiated hard, securing strong financial terms and demanding professional standards on set that were unusual for any production in the genre. This was not a compromise. This was a declaration. She was coming back on her own terms. $500,000. And every cent showed on screen. London locations. Tower Bridge. Wellington Arch. Back in California, Marble Estates. Ferrari motorcades. Luxury pools. 35mm celluloid. Same format as Hollywood. Warm, rich, cinematic, original score. And Marilyn Chambers herself sang the opening theme. Helicopter, aerial footage, the visual grammar of a real theatrical feature. That was always the point. May 1980. 3 cities, New York, San Francisco, Denver. That same week, her hands and feet pressed into cement outside the Pussycat Theater. Only the second performer ever given that honor. Nearly $2 million. 3 cities alone. Then the VHS release arrived. She toured stores. She hit the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. She signed. She showed up. She worked for it. 2 consecutive years best-selling home video in America. Every category, every genre, all of it. XRCO Hall of Fame. Greatest classic films in its genre. Best Restoration, 2004. Hall of Fame inductee. But the legacy goes beyond awards. This film is a time capsule. The precise moment the Golden Age was breathing its last, and 2 people decided to make something worth remembering. Within 18 months, that world was gone forever. This was the last time the Golden Age believed it was making art. It was right. Marilyn Chambers passed away April 12, 2009. 56 years old. A worn autobiography by her bedside. A glass of wine. A cigarette burned to a single unbroken ash. In 2010, a New York stage play opened about her world. She auditioned weeks before she died. She stopped the room. On opening night, her ashes placed on the stage, held in an Ivory Snow box. Insatiable was never just a film. A declaration that a woman Hollywood discarded was not finished. 45 years later, her name still means something. What was the first Marilyn Chambers film you ever saw? Leave it below. I read every one. Subscribe to Retro Cinema, History, and Icon Biographies every single week. Community tab is open. Your vote decides what we cover next. I will see you in the next one.